Okay, so ready to dive in. Today, we're tackling something that, let's face it, pretty much everyone deals with at some point.
Mm-hmm.
How to feel more at ease and confident in social situations.
Yeah, for sure. And we've got a really interesting guidebook to help us out today, the Social Skills Guidebook, which I think takes a refreshingly practical approach.
Exactly. We're not talking about some magical personality makeover or, assuming you have to be born with a gift of gab.
Right. It's more about seeing social skills as something you can actually develop and improve over time.
Like learning a new language or picking up a musical instrument, as the book points out, it takes effort and practice, for
Sure.
sure.
But the payoff can be huge, right?
Absolutely. So for anyone listening who's ever felt like they're a bit behind in the social game, like they're trying to play catch up,
Yeah.
this deep dive is for you. We're going to break down the most useful strategies from this guidebook, focusing on everything from overcoming shyness and those sometimes crippling feelings of social anxiety to just connecting with people more genuinely and effortlessly.
Without getting bogged down in theory, right?
Exactly. We're all about actionable advice here. So we'll look at how to actually practice social skills in everyday life. No need for formal practice sessions or anything like that.
Yeah, just integrating it into your daily routine.
Right. And we'll talk about understanding those sometimes uncomfortable physical sensations that come with shyness and anxiety. We'll also dig into those pesky thought patterns that can sabotage our confidence. Those negative self-talk loops.
Oh, for sure. Those can be real confidence killers.
Absolutely. Then we'll move on to the foundations, building self-esteem, and feeling more confident in specific situations.
And then getting into the nitty-gritty of conversations, how to start them smoothly, keep them flowing, and navigate those sometimes tricky group settings.
Yes, and empathy and active listening, such crucial skills for building genuine connections. We'll cover those in depth.
And we can't forget about nonverbals, learning to read those unspoken cues and manage our own body language.
Oh, absolutely. Plus, we'll explore what makes people generally more likable and fun to be around.
Right, because that plays a huge role too.
Totally. And we'll discuss developing assertiveness, setting healthy boundaries, and feeling more comfortable expressing your needs.
And finally, the big one, making friends. We'll cover everything from finding potential friends to making plans and nurturing those new relationships.
Plus, addressing some common challenges people face in that area.
Yeah, like dealing with rejection or feeling awkward about initiating contact. We've got you covered.
And just a quick heads up, the guidebook also has a really insightful appendix on Asperger's syndrome and its impact on socializing, which we'll touch on briefly.
Great. So where do we start unpacking all this?
Well, since this guidebook keeps comparing social skills to learning an instrument, like the guitar, why don't we start with how to actually practice them in everyday life?
Makes sense. And the book outlines 3 main ways to get that practice.
Right. The first one is all about increasing your general social interactions. This isn't about, like, setting up formal practice sessions. It's more about being mindful and seizing those everyday opportunities to connect with people.
Exactly. And the guidebook really stresses the importance of engaging more with the people you already know, your friends, family, coworkers. Those are low-pressure interactions where you can kind of ease into things.
Right. It also suggests that if you're looking for more interaction, a job that involves a lot of customer contact can be super helpful, like working in retail or being a server. Volunteering is another great avenue. It's a chance to meet new people who share similar values and interests, and it often involves interacting in a social capacity.
Yeah, like organizing events or assisting at a charity.
Right. The guidebook also highlights joining clubs, teams, or organizations centered around your hobbies.
Yeah, that's a great way to meet people who are already into the things you enjoy. And with online platforms like Meetup.com, it's easier than ever to find groups based on your interests.
Totally.
Yeah.
Even those brief everyday interactions we have, like with the cashier at the grocery store or the barista at your coffee shop.
Yeah, those little moments.
The book points out those can be surprisingly useful for practicing. And for those feeling a bit more adventurous, it even suggests travel, particularly staying in hostels, as a way to immerse yourself in new social environments.
Oh, that's interesting. And it acknowledges that while online interaction isn't a perfect substitute for face-to-face,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be dismissed entirely, especially as a way to supplement your real-world practice.
Now, I know some listeners might be thinking, okay, so this all sounds great, but the book mentions it could take 1 to 3 years to see significant changes. That might feel a bit daunting.
Yeah, I can see that. But the book offers a really helpful perspective, drawing on that musical instrument analogy again. When you're first learning anything new, those initial stages are often the most challenging. But as you build a foundation, the process becomes much more enjoyable and you start to see tangible progress.
Right. And it emphasizes that improvement isn't always a slow, linear process.
Mm.
For example, understanding and avoiding those common mistakes people make in trying to form friendships.
Mm-hmm.
That can actually lead to relatively quick and noticeable improvements in your social life.
Yeah, sometimes it's just about making a few key adjustments.
Exactly. And the book is very clear on this point. Social skills can be learned and developed at any age. Unlike something like language acquisition, where there's a critical period,
Right?
there's no point where you've missed your chance to build a fulfilling social life.
So no need to feel like you're too old to start. You have your entire life to cultivate these skills.
Absolutely. And to stay motivated on this journey, the book really stresses the importance of tracking your progress.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
It gives you concrete evidence that you're actually making positive changes,
Mm-hmm.
even when it might not always feel obvious in the moment.
Because sometimes it's those subtle shifts that make a big difference over time.
Right. So noticing that you initiated more conversations this month or connected with a few new people, that can be a real boost, especially when you're feeling discouraged.
Yes, those little wins that keep you going.
Okay, so practice is fundamental. But what happens when that practice is constantly being undermined by feelings of shyness and anxiety?
Right, because those can be huge obstacles. The book defines shyness as that feeling of being inhibited and uncomfortable in social situations because you're so preoccupied with how you might be coming across to others.
And it's not a black and white thing, is it?
Definitely not. It exists on a spectrum from mild discomfort to more intense forms that can overlap significantly with social anxiety.
And the outward signs of shyness can be so varied. The book lists things like hesitating to speak, being generally quiet, appearing meek, lacking in confidence,
Mm-hmm.
and exhibiting physical discomfort like fidgeting, avoiding eye contact, or defensively crossing your arms.
Yeah, it can show up in so many different ways.
It can even manifest as difficulty speaking clearly, like stuttering or just sounding unsure of yourself. And it's interesting, the book also points out that sometimes nervousness can lead people to overcompensate by being unusually outgoing.
Oh, right, like trying to mask the shyness by being super introverted.
Exactly. Or even appearing cold or aloof as a way of protecting themselves from social discomfort.
Yeah, I can see that, like putting up a wall.
Right. And then, of course, there are those physical manifestations we all know so well. The blushing, trembling, sweating,
Yeah.
that whole physiological response that can make you feel even more self-conscious.
And the book makes a particularly insightful point about how anxiety can very subtly lead to avoidance.
Oh, yeah, it's not always a conscious decision to cancel plans or anything like that.
Right. It can show up as finding seemingly logical excuses like, oh, I'm too busy tonight, or
Yeah.
simply putting off social opportunities, even if you intellectually want to participate.
The procrastination trap.
Yeah, exactly. That I'll do it later when the time feels right feeling, which often never comes.
Exactly. And for those struggling with more intense social anxiety, the Guidebook provides a summary of the diagnostic criteria for social anxiety disorder.
Right, which can be helpful for understanding the clinical markers.
It includes things like a persistent fear of social situations where you might be scrutinized, a fear of being negatively evaluated,
Mm-hmm.
and those social situations almost always triggering anxiety, even leading to active avoidance.
Yeah, it can be really debilitating.
The Guidebook emphasizes that even if you don't meet all the criteria for a clinical diagnosis,
Mhm.
if you're experiencing even some of these elements, social situations can feel super difficult.
Definitely. And the strategies we're discussing today can still be incredibly helpful for managing those feelings.
Absolutely. And the book makes a really crucial point. If you're struggling with shyness, social anxiety, and feelings of insecurity,
Yeah.
it's often most effective to address those underlying issues directly before solely focusing on your conversation skills.
Because if you're super anxious in social settings, even if you technically know what to say,
Right.
the anxiety itself can make it so much harder to express yourself or to interpret those interactions in a positive light.
Totally. But it also wisely cautions that you don't have to be completely free of anxiety before you start practicing your social skills.
Yeah, you don't have to wait for that magical moment when you suddenly feel completely confident.
It's more about learning to manage those feelings as you engage.
Right. Working with them rather than against them.
And, it's actually reassuring that the book normalizes those pre-social jitters. Feeling nervous before or during a social event,
Yeah,
it doesn't automatically mean you've failed or ruined the experience.
yeah,
Even if you feel a bit on edge at the beginning,
right.
that feeling will likely subside. Think back to a time when you were nervous to attend something you really valued.
No, like a big presentation or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. That initial anxiety probably didn't define the whole experience, right?
Definitely not.
So the book suggests reframing that nervousness. Instead of seeing it as a danger signal, see it as a natural part of pushing yourself outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, like growing pains.
Exactly. It even recommends adopting a more proactive, almost defiant attitude. Like, okay, I might feel nervous, but I'm not going to let it control me.
Oh, I like that. Like taking ownership of the feeling.
And here's a really interesting tip. The book suggests casually mentioning to the people you're with that you're feeling a bit shy or nervous, not in a big dramatic way, but just a simple acknowledgement.
So not making it a huge deal.
Exactly. Because, let's face it, most people have experienced similar feelings.
Yeah, everyone gets nervous sometimes.
So by being open about it in a relaxed way, you signal that it's not a major issue for you, and it can even help to break the ice.
Yeah, I can see that. It makes you more relatable.
And ultimately, the book emphasizes that shyness and anxiety are just normal human emotions. They're not signs of weakness or anything like that.
Right, so no need to beat yourself up about it.
Exactly. Practice self-compassion. Oh, wait, so moving on to another really important area. Understanding and challenging those counterproductive thought patterns. The book explains that people who experience shyness often develop these thinking habits that actually amplify their perceived social risks and undermine their confidence.
Yeah, like assuming everyone's judging them harshly or seeing themselves as less socially capable than they actually are.
Right. And this is where the concept of cognitive distortions comes in. The book highlights several common ones. There's overgeneralization, where you take one negative social experience and apply it as a broad rule.
Oh, like if one person didn't seem interested in talking to me, then nobody must like me.
Exactly. Then there's filtering, where you tend to focus only on the negative aspects of an interaction and ignore any positive ones.
So you hyper focus on that one awkward moment and completely forget about all the good parts of the conversation.
Exactly. And then there's magnification and minimization, exaggerating the importance of negative social events and downplaying any positive feedback you receive.
So you blow a minor social faux pas way out of proportion while dismissing a genuine compliment.
Right. And beyond these distortions, the book delves into those unhelpful underlying beliefs that can really hold us back.
Oh, yeah, those deep-seated beliefs about ourselves in social situations.
Exactly. These can be beliefs you hold about yourself, like being shy is a negative trait, or there's something fundamentally flawed about me socially.
And those can be so hard to shake.
They really can. Then there are beliefs about social risks, like my entire self-worth depends on how well I do socially, or every single interaction is a test that I have to pass.
Like you're constantly being evaluated.
Right. And finally, there can be unhelpful beliefs about the consequences of social mistakes, like it would be absolutely mortifying if anyone realized I was shy, or if I make a mistake, the consequences will be catastrophic.
Oh, yeah, those catastrophic thinking patterns.
Exactly. Or even if someone rejects me, it's completely intolerable.
That fear of rejection can be paralyzing.
It really can be. So how do we start to dismantle these destructive thought patterns? The book outlines a four-step process.
Okay, so a step-by-step approach.
The first step is to become aware of and identify your own counterproductive thoughts and beliefs. The book suggests writing these down can be much more effective than just thinking about them abstractly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Getting them out of your head and onto paper.
Right. And this is often an ongoing process of self-awareness. It's not a one-time thing.
Right, you have to keep checking in with yourself and noticing those patterns.
Exactly. The second step is to critically question each thought you've identified. The book encourages you to examine its tone.
Like, is it overly harsh or judgmental?
Exactly. Does it contain any of those cognitive distortions or unhelpful beliefs we just discussed? And what objective evidence do you actually have to support this thought?
Yeah, because often those negative thoughts are based on assumptions and not facts.
Right. And if you think you do have evidence, ask yourself if that evidence is potentially being distorted by your own thinking.
Oh, that's a good point. Like, maybe you're interpreting a neutral situation negatively.
Exactly. Step 3 is where you actively work on replacing that unhelpful thought with a more realistic and balanced alternative.
So coming up with a more positive and accurate way of thinking about the situation.
Right. And the book stresses that the tone of this new thought is just as important as its accuracy. It should be kind and understanding towards yourself.
Yeah, no need to replace one negative thought with another slightly less negative one.
Exactly. And the fourth step is continuous questioning, because these negative thought patterns are often so ingrained.
Yeah, they can be like deeply worn grooves in our minds.
It takes consistent effort to identify and challenge them. So while those initial written exercises are super helpful for awareness, the goal is to recognize and quickly analyze these thoughts in real time.
Like catching them before they spiral out of control.
Exactly. And the guidebook provides some great examples of common distorted thoughts and their more realistic alternatives.
Oh, that's helpful. Like concrete examples.
Yeah. For instance, instead of thinking, I just know everyone at this party thinks I'm awkward, a more realistic thought might be, unless I have clear evidence of that, it's more likely that I'm projecting my own insecurities.
Yeah, because we often assume others are thinking about us way more than they actually are.
Right. Or instead of fortune telling, like, if I try to join that conversation, I'll just say something stupid. The alternative could be, even if I don't say something brilliant, most people are understanding and it's worth trying to connect.
That's a much healthier perspective.
Another really powerful technique the book mentions is mindfulness. Now, mindfulness isn't about suppressing or getting rid of unwanted thoughts and feelings. It's about learning to observe them without judgment, to see them as mental events rather than absolute truths.
So not getting caught up in the stories our minds create.
Exactly. The guidebook compares those anxious thoughts to mental noise, just a byproduct of how our minds work.
Like background chatter that you don't have to pay attention to.
Right. You can simply notice them as they arise, and then gently let them pass without getting swept away.
That takes practice, but it can be so liberating.
It really can. And the same principle applies to your emotions. If you feel a wave of nervousness or sadness in a social setting,
Yeah.
the idea isn't to fight it or try to suppress it, which can actually make it more intense.
It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater.
Exactly. The book suggests observing the emotion with detached curiosity, almost like watching a wave in the ocean. It rises, it crests, and then it recedes.
So riding the wave instead of getting wiped out by it.
Right. Overreacting just prolongs the discomfort.
The book also points out that direct experience itself can be a powerful teacher in managing social anxiety.
Oh yeah, there's no substitute for actually putting yourself out there.
While those initial experiences of intense anxiety can feel overwhelming and scary, over time, as you continue to engage in social situations, you start to understand your own personal anxiety patterns better, your triggers, your coping mechanisms. You get better at recognizing what's happening and applying your learned techniques.
So it becomes less about avoiding the anxiety altogether and more about learning to navigate it effectively.
Exactly, like developing a sense of mastery over it.
Okay, so we're building a toolkit for managing the inner landscape of social interactions. But what about some practical, in-the-moment techniques for when anxiety starts to bubble up during a social encounter?
Right, like what can you do right then and there? The book offers a few key techniques for calming yourself down. Deep breathing is a cornerstone. It actively triggers your body's relaxation response.
So it directly counteracts those physiological symptoms of anxiety.
Right. The 4-7-8 breathing technique is specifically mentioned. You inhale slowly through your nose for a count of 4, hold for 7, and exhale slowly through your mouth for 8.
The precise timing isn't critical, but that emphasis on slow, deep breathing, especially the longer exhale, that really helps to regulate your nervous system.
It kind of resets things.
Exactly.
Wow.
The book also recommends soothing music and guided relaxation meditations.
Oh, yeah, those can be really helpful.
There are tons of free recordings available online. And, of course, exercise. Super effective for reducing anxiety, both in the long run and in the short term.
Yeah, it's a natural mood booster.
Even a brisk walk before a social event can make a difference.
Definitely. Now, let's talk about those nerves that build up before a social event, that anticipatory anxiety. That can be tough, especially for commitments you can't easily back out of.
Totally.
The book reiterates the value of using those distraction and relaxation techniques we just talked about, as well as actively challenging or trying to ride out those anxious thoughts. But it also emphasizes something really crucial: intentionally facing your fears.
Ah, yes. The concept of gradual exposure.
Exactly. The book explains that avoiding situations that trigger your anxiety actually reinforces that anxiety in the long run. So to break that situation nervousness link, you need to intentionally stay in the feared situation for long enough to allow your anxiety to naturally decrease and to realize that you will be okay.
Right. Because if you just briefly expose yourself and then escape, it strengthens the association between the situation and that feeling of fear.
Like you're confirming to your brain that it's something to be afraid of.
Exactly. And the encouraging thing is that fears that seem quite different on the surface can often be tackled using those same exposure principles. Whether it's a fear of being in a certain environment,
Yep.
like a crowded party,
Yeah.
or a fear of specific types of interactions, like initiating a conversation with someone you don't know, that underlying principle of gradual repeated exposure still applies.
So the approach is similar, even if the specific fears are different.
Right. For environmental fears, the goal might be to simply stay in that environment until you start to feel your anxiety level going down. For interactional fears, it might involve setting a goal to initiate a certain number of conversations during an event.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're gradually desensitizing yourself to the thing you're afraid of.
Exactly. And after each deliberate exposure session, the book stresses the importance of debriefing with yourself.
Oh, yeah. That's so important.
And this isn't just about dwelling on any negative thoughts that might have come up, but also actively acknowledging what went well.
Yeah, focusing on the positives.
Right. Did you hesitate less than usual? Did you catch yourself thinking more constructively during the interaction?
It's about celebrating those small wins.
Exactly. The book even suggests keeping a written record of these successes, as it can be really motivating to look back and see how far you've come.
Like a progress journal. I like that.
Yeah. And the overall advice is to make facing your fears a regular practice, even creating a step-by-step hierarchy of your fears, starting with the least anxiety-provoking and gradually working your way up.
So taking it one step at a time.
Exactly. Consistency is key here, just like sticking to an exercise routine.
Okay, so this work on managing anxiety and facing your fears, this naturally sets the stage for building stronger self-esteem and developing what the book calls situational confidence.
Right, because those are the inner foundations for positive social interactions. The book defines core self-esteem as that deep, fundamental comfort and acceptance you have with yourself, including all your imperfections.
So not about striving for perfection, but more about that solid underlying sense of self-worth.
Exactly. And there are several factors that contribute to this self-acceptance. The book highlights learning to be kinder and more compassionate towards yourself.
Yeah, treating yourself like you would treat a good friend.
Right. Acknowledging your personal history and past experiences without dwelling on them negatively, reducing self-criticism, and practicing self-forgiveness.
It's about letting go of that harsh inner critic.
Absolutely. The book clarifies that self-acceptance doesn't mean you lose the desire for personal growth. It might just shift your motivations away from solely seeking validation from others.
So you're not doing it to impress anyone, but because you genuinely value your own growth.
Right. Another crucial aspect of building self-esteem is actively identifying, questioning, and ultimately discrediting those negative self-talk patterns.
Yeah, this can be so insidious.
While some of the more superficial negative beliefs can shift relatively quickly once you bring them into conscious awareness and examine them logically, others, particularly those rooted in early childhood experiences, might require more effort and potentially even therapy.
So sometimes professional support can be really helpful for unpacking those deeper issues.
Definitely. The book also points out that genuine self-esteem arises from your actions being in alignment with your values. Changing your behaviors to be more consistent with what you believe is important can really boost your self-esteem.
So walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Right. But it emphasizes that this should be built upon that foundation of self-acceptance, not as a way to try and cancel out some underlying feeling of worthlessness.
It's about building yourself up, not trying to fix some perceived brokenness.
Exactly. Identifying your core values and striving to live in accordance with them is key. The book also cautions against becoming overly reliant on those quick mood-boosting techniques.
Oh yeah, like positive affirmations or dressing well.
While those can provide a temporary lift,
Mm-hmm.
they don't address those deeper, more fundamental self-esteem issues.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone.
Exactly. It also warns against those unhealthy coping mechanisms, like comparing yourself to people you perceive as worse off, or seeking constant reassurance from others.
Yeah, those can backfire in the long run.
Okay, now the book makes a useful distinction between core self-esteem and what it calls situational confidence.
Oh, that's interesting. So there's a difference.
Situational confidence is that more specific feeling of competence and belief in your ability within a particular context, like
Yeah.
that I know I can handle this feeling.
Okay, so it's more context specific.
Exactly. And the two don't always perfectly align.
Yeah.
You might have healthy core self-esteem, but still feel out of your depth in certain social situations.
Like you generally feel good about yourself, but you still get nervous about public speaking.
Right. The good news is that situational confidence in areas where you feel less comfortable can be built through accumulating small successes.
So it's about taking those small steps and building momentum.
The book encourages embracing that newbie mindset, focusing on mastery of the fundamental skills, and recognizing that you don't need super high levels of confidence to start improving. Work on your self-esteem, but don't put everything else on hold until you suddenly feel amazing.
That's really encouraging.
All right, feeling a little more solid on the inside.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's turn to the interactions themselves, improving those conversational skills. One area that trips people up is small talk. It can feel superficial or even boring. What does the book say about the role of small talk?
Well, it acknowledges that feeling of it being somewhat unengaging, but it really emphasizes its role as that initial step in starting conversations.
Like a gateway to more interesting topics.
Exactly. It's that low-stakes way to begin building rapport and exploring potential common ground.
So don't get too hung up on the perceived dullness of small talk. See it as a bridge.
Right. And what about those moments when a conversation topic naturally runs its course? It can feel awkward shifting to something new.
Totally.
The book normalizes this completely. It's natural for conversations to flow from one topic to another. It even offers pointers for making those transitions smoother, like using phrases like, oh yeah, that reminds me of, or speaking of something different.
Yeah, those are good. Or even a brief pause to signal a shift.
Right. Now, group conversations, those can present a whole new set of challenges. It can be difficult to follow multiple threads, know when to jump in, and generally feel like you're contributing meaningfully without dominating.
Oh, for sure. Group dynamics can be tricky.
The book touches on this, referencing those strategies for managing anxious thoughts as a way to stay present and engaged in group settings. It also suggests preparing a few potential topics or questions beforehand, especially for situations where certain questions might come up.
Oh, like at parties or work events.
Exactly. Having a few conversation starters in your back pocket can help.
And what if a conversation starts a bit awkwardly? Is that a bad sign?
Not necessarily. The book points out it's pretty common for conversations to feel a little stilted at the beginning as people get to know each other.
Like finding that rhythm.
Right. This initial awkwardness doesn't mean the interaction won't improve or that your social skills are lacking. It just takes a bit of time for everyone to relax. And the book acknowledges that sometimes conversations just peter out naturally, and that's okay too.
Yeah, no need to overanalyze it.
Exactly. Having a few graceful exit strategies in mind can help in those situations so you don't feel like you have to force it.
Good point. Approaching people you don't know can feel daunting. What's the advice for striking up conversations with strangers?
The book differentiates between various contexts. In some public places, like waiting in line or browsing in a store, brief, friendly interactions are generally okay. Work environments often provide natural opportunities for starting conversations. For social events like parties or meetups, there's more implicit permission to approach people. But the book wisely advises being mindful of people's cues and respecting if someone seems uninterested in engaging.
Yeah, reading those signals is key.
It offers examples of conversation starters, like commenting on the environment, mentioning a current event, asking a non-threatening open-ended question, or trying to find shared interests.
Good examples. And what if the person you approach seems shy or hesitant to engage? Should you just give up?
Not necessarily. The book encourages taking more of a leading role if the other person seems reserved.
So kind of helping to get the ball rolling.
Right. This might involve asking a more personal but still lighthearted, getting to know you question, steering the conversation to a different topic if needed, asking broader questions to uncover shared interests, or even doing a bit more talking initially to help the other person feel more comfortable.
Yeah, sometimes you have to carry the conversation a bit more at the start.
Exactly. It's about gently facilitating that exchange.
Now, self-disclosure, sharing personal information about yourself, that's another important aspect of building connections. What's the advice there?
It explains that appropriate self-disclosure is vital for deepening intimacy in relationships.
Makes sense. Vulnerability fosters connection.
It suggests a gradual approach, starting with sharing more general information and progressively moving towards more personal disclosures as trust builds and you observe reciprocation. Oversharing too early can feel overwhelming, while being too guarded can also be self-defeating.
Right, it's about finding that balance.
The key is to be willing to share more about yourself with a calm and confident attitude as the relationship develops.
Okay, we've covered starting and keeping conversations going. What about bringing them to a natural close? That can sometimes feel awkward.
The book points out that the expectations for ending a conversation really depend on the type of interaction. Brief, casual encounters have different ending protocols than longer, more in-depth discussions.
So for quick interactions, like running into someone who's clearly busy or having a quick work-related chat, it's perfectly acceptable to politely excuse yourself without a lengthy explanation.
Right, just a simple, it was nice chatting, but I have to run.
Exactly. What about those vague closing remarks people use, like, we should definitely get together sometime? Are those usually genuine?
The book acknowledges it can be tricky to interpret those. While they can be sincere expressions of wanting to connect further, often they're just a friendly way to end the current interaction. If you're genuinely interested but unsure of their intent, it doesn't hurt to follow up with a more concrete suggestion.
So gauge their level of interest.
Right. For those who just keep talking about topics you're not interested in, the book advises having a few polite phrases ready to gracefully extract yourself.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to politely disengage.
Okay, let's revisit those often daunting group dynamics. Navigating conversations with multiple people can feel way different than one-on-one chats.
For sure. Group conversations have their own unique rhythm.
The book highlights several differences. Your contributions are for the whole group, the energy levels can fluctuate more, and there's less individual pressure to keep things going.
Right, so the dynamics are different.
The challenge is finding those opportunities to contribute meaningfully without dominating or feeling left out.
Yeah, finding your spot in the flow.
The book suggests first assessing whether a group seems open to having someone new join. Then it offers strategies for joining in, like briefly introducing yourself if appropriate.